So I was wrong. In particular, I was wrong about Amazon aggregators. What is up, guys? Welcome to Heist. If this is your first time here, I break down my own experiences, strategies, and thoughts on the e-commerce space in Amazon FBA specifically. And if you followed this channel for a while, or even if you haven't, I'm going to walk down history lane here a little bit with my own experience in the Amazon aggregator ecosystem. It's basically these larger enterprise businesses that have raised a lot of debt as well as venture capital to go out, seek, find, acquire, and roll up a bunch of Amazon FBA individual brands underneath one business. Now, this model is not new. In fact, in the business environment, it's been happening for a long time. People will target a specific vertical or industry. They will acquire a lot of smaller pieces, combine them together, use economies of scale, use centralized functions, and ultimately a conglomerated multiple to then go build, grow, and ultimately exit their own business for a higher multiple than what they paid. So if you look back a couple years ago, this was a predominant space started by Thrasio, and then over the course of about 18 months, $7 billion plus had been raised across 50 plus Amazon aggregators using this model. Now, for a while there, things were rosy. People were raising hundreds of millions of bucks. Everyone's happy. Investors are breaking out their checkbook and writing a bunch of checks. The Amazon aggregators themselves are happy. Their employees are happy because their shares are going up. But winter has come. The huge spike in e-commerce and Amazon spending specifically during COVID has been very difficult to comp, so that growth hasn't been there. And I think a lot of these Amazon aggregators relatively predictably have found that it's pretty dang hard to run these businesses as a standalone, let alone dozens and dozens and dozens at a time. And because I honestly think that this has been one of the most interesting business periods and business case studies of my career, and the fact that I know quite a bit about Amazon and built my own brands and have a corporate M&A background historically, I've been like on the pulse of this stuff. It's been super fascinating for me to participate in it, to get to know the players, and to watch from the sidelines and directly this whole thing transpire. So I've done a lot of videos on this topic. Back a year and a half ago in June, when I sold my own business, I talked about that story. I talked about how I actually sold it myself, reaching out to 50 plus Amazon aggregators, speaking to 20 plus, whittling that down to offers, and ultimately selling my own business. Coming out of that, I did a video on how I invested in the actual Amazon aggregator that purchased my business. And I've since done a deep dive on my predictions about the Amazon aggregator space. And the cliff notes on that video is basically that these Amazon businesses are pretty difficult to run. They're really lean on OpEx. And the fact that the aggregators rely on a debt model where that debt is often 12% plus, the math is very difficult to make work if you're not at least growing the businesses that you acquire. So I got a lot of that stuff right. I mean, we've seen that a lot of these businesses have not comp growth. They have been very difficult to run. The operators and the skills to operate the businesses were really critical, not just raising money and kind of having those headline PR releases of the big debt funds that were raised. But I think it's really important as you look at your own decisions, you look at your own predictions, you look at your own viewpoint on the world and in business and on Amazon, is when the facts come back that are different from what you thought originally, you've got to have the intellectual honesty to say, you know what, I got that thing wrong. And there's something really major that I got wrong in my analysis. And I think we've seen this play out with the Amazon aggregators that have had really good discipline from an M&A standpoint, from the Amazon aggregators that have raised debt and venture in a very smart way to get the math right so that the debt hasn't burned the business. And most importantly, to run these businesses at scale. So one thing that's very true, and I still believe it, is that the operators will win. Now, back when I made my original thoughts over the last year, I thought that the buttoned up corporate spreadsheet jockeys, those kind of non-Amazon folks, would just get punched in the teeth and they'd have a very difficult time translating those skills to running an Amazon business. Well, that's happened in some cases. I think one thing that has become very true is that to hit a terminal velocity as an Amazon aggregator, and what I mean by this is scaling into 9 figures plus in top line revenue, bringing on north of 40 brands, that requires a different skill set. And frankly, it's not an Amazon operator skill set. I think if you're going to run an individual 7 or 8 figure brand, that Amazon operator model makes a ton of sense. I think if you've acquired 10, maybe even 20 businesses and you're doing like 50 to 60 to 70 million a year, that Amazon operator model is very much true. But frankly, I discounted how important those button up corporate high growth skills running a real big business came into play as it relates to the Amazon ecosystem. And while I think we've got three tranches, some that just flat out failed and are going to get purchased from other larger Amazon aggregators. You've got some that are just holding steady and not necessarily acquiring a lot of new brands right now. They're focusing on the ones that they've got. And then I think there's another tier that has frankly thrived and now have access to a pool of businesses at really low multiples because the market's down. And I think what was different about these players are, again, they had sophisticated corporate enterprise level skills. We're talking about VP and C level suite folks that have grown other really large businesses, that have worked at investment banks, that have seen scale in the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And I think what we've seen with these players is that they had the discipline and the right mindset when they were acquiring businesses, the funding that they brought in, both in terms of venture and debt. Because of their Rolodex, because of their experience, they got really, really good rates. So they haven't been burned by the debt. And they've had the skill to hire the right sophisticated talent, most of which is frankly stateside, to actually take a business to the $100 million plus mark. So I think it's really easy to look at these folks at conferences and to look at the press releases, and there's quite a bit of stigma for these button-up corporate types. But frankly, I think those are the ones part and parcel that have survived the winter the best, that will thrive the most and make the most value acquiring inexpensive, undervalued assets over the next couple of years, and that will attract that funding necessary to take this model beyond this lull and into the 3, 5, 10 years ahead as this space and ecosystem develops. So that might not be a popular opinion. In fact, it's probably a fairly controversial opinion in the world of the Amazon FBA seller, because it's easy to kind of point at the big bad corporate guy, but that's my take on it. I'm falling on the sword. I think I got that part wrong. I will continue to watch this space keenly because, again, I'm just super interested in it, but I'm super curious to hear what your thoughts are, what you think the Amazon aggregators that are getting it right are doing, what you think the elements of success for scaling and buying lots of these businesses, and what you think is going to happen next. We'll check the tape again, and I will come back in 6, 12, 24 months as we continue to see this stuff develop. If my opinion changes, if my thoughts change, if the facts change, you'll hear it here first. So if this is your first time here, hit subscribe. We drop videos like this, as well as deep dive content on how to scale Amazon FBA businesses every single Monday. It'd be really cool to have you here as part of the community. Until next week, cheers, guys.